So,
The beauty of editing.
yeah, so probably I have to step out right there. You're looking at her though.
Okay, all right.
And you look great. Just go ahead and start anytime you want. You want me to ask you questions or can you just start talking?
No, he wants a prompt.
Okay, so what are we going to talk about first then?
So we're basically the genesis. Parka was established, the genesis of EV, and
Oh, you're going to take it all the way back to the beginning. That's wonderful.
well,
Yeah.
not the genesis in Parka,
Okay.
right? Because
Like-
that's where
like-
these were established.
So you
And
start out, where you can start. Okay, you can start out with where. Because I'm trying to hear it through this. Yeah, you can start out with something along the lines of where Gary and I came into the picture.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
that's a
right,
good place to start.
all right.
But he's waving his paper around.
Yeah, and yeah, do not. Yeah. I got her all the whole
Can I take it?
I need to read. You can take it after I read it, but I'll get to it fairly quickly. So when Parka was established, and Gary took ownership of Earned Value, he took ownership not because it was legislatively required, but because that tool was necessary for him to do his legislative job. And he didn't see anybody else really taking care of it from a policy, and he needed to have the right data and good quality data in order to do his job. So he took ownership, and AT&L, Dr. Carter at the time gave him Earned Value as one of the initiatives.
So you're going to pick it up, and he took ownership of AT&L, where you're going to pick up, okay?
Okay. He took ownership.
After the truck's gone.
I'm waiting for this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hopefully.
Well, there's a lawnmower there going.
Of course.
Go help him.
I'll put this on pause.
I'll do the front yard. I'll hear it because it's so close to the mic.
So I'll get rid of the paper as soon as I can here.
Okay.
So I was fortunate enough to join Parka under Gary Bliss. He had gotten EV underneath his office because it was going to be able to help him do his legislative job. I joined about a year after he had started the office, and he gave me a set of principles that essentially drove everything we did from then on. I'd like to read those principles because they are foundational, and they are anyway. So they drove everything we did,
Yeah.
and they remained the same for the 4.5 years that I was
You're
there.
gonna introduce principles to me, not right.
All right, okay.
Right there. Thank
All right. So the first one was increase quality and utility of the Earned Value data. And I'll just go ahead and read the 5, and then I'll talk about the initiatives and how they relate to them. Increase the use of EVM across the acquisition chain. Acquisition professionals have the necessary knowledge and skills to do their job. Keep doing that, don't I? Reduce the administrative burden. And ensure constructive communication amongst the acquisition community to include industry and government. So I'll go through chronologically. One of the first things that I did was to establish the EV division as an authority underneath AT&L for policy and implementation across the enterprise. So we drafted a set of responsibilities. We discussed them with the EVIPT, which is the representatives across the department of doing Earned Value, that sort of thing. And we came up with essentially a page and a half of what the Parka authorities were going to be, and we got it signed off by Frank Kendall. Actually signed it on behalf of Dr. Carter. So from that point, so I joined the place in Parka in May of 2011, and by August we had established the authorities that had signed. We had established a communication mechanism for industry to come with issues. They were looking for an ombudsman process, but what we did, we couldn't legally do that, so we established an issues and resolution process that they could bring issues over the web to Parka. And again, that was primarily to enhance the communications with industry and as part of that fifth initiative. The next thing that we did in the fall of 2011 was we established for the first ever a role-based EV competency model that would drive role-based, meaning that it was cross-functional, so that earned value for PMs, earned value for system engineers, earned value for finance and FM and contracts. They're all involved. Earned value is a participation sport by all program members, and so we wanted to understand the competencies across the different, they call them the DOEA career fields. It's the DoD acquisition career fields. And so we reviewed all of the competency models, the program management, the system engineering, the logistics, contracts, biz FM, and then we found competencies in there that would benefit from the use of earned value. And then those are the competencies that we established as the first set of earned value competencies. And then we use that content to then drive a strategy for how DAU should teach earned value across these different career fields. And so that was the fall of 2011. One of the things that we did is they had been working on updating the cost per performance report and the integrated master schedule DIDs for a few years, but they were ready to be reissued. The community was working for years on a data format, UNCFACT, XML, and it was going to allow both the schedule and the cost to be delivered under one umbrella to enhance the notion of integrated program management, integrated analysis, that sort of thing. And it was about that time frame that the Parka office, particularly me and all of my forums, were evangelizing that earned value is very important, but integrated program management is even more important, because earned value is targeted at a small subset of the programs that need to be program managed within the DoD, where integrated program management applies to them all. So we published an integrated program management report, which was combined the cost and the schedule report, and asked that it get delivered in an electronic format so that a variety of tools could take that and support the integrated analysis. Well, so why did we do that? Well, because we wanted to make it easier for people to use it in the field. That was one of the principles. We wanted the quality of the data to be better. Well, if it's electronic, you can do a bunch of quality checks. All along, we'd had the earned value management repository, central repository, but we took particular note to establish some stronger data quality checks on the data being pushed into the repository. We made the central repository as the authoritative source, so that would force program managers, government program managers, to use it, so that if they came up to AT&L and they were briefing status of their program, all of the OSD staff who used the earned value data out of the repository, if the program manager was using different data from an earned value perspective, they'd have to explain why they weren't using the authoritative source, which was in the, and so that demanded the use of earned value by program managers in the field. So again, that was all part of increasing the data quality, increasing its use, increasing its importance across the department. So that was 2012. Every year we did a tweak on the competency model and did a little bit more work on DAU, on the courseware that they were going to do, that sort of thing. They had been working on an updated EVM 101, which was cross-functional. I think that actually went live in the 2015 time frame. 2013 was really focused on, we had put out a couple of policies, and it was focused primarily on then institutionalization of it, right? How do we get people to use this stuff? How do we continue to increase the use of the earned value central repository? How do we get people to understand what the new DID says, understand what they should be doing with it? And it was actually a communication year. So we started to do a lot of training. We went out to the field and we got industry and government together, and we would train on what the DID was all about. We would train on the central repository. We would train on the competency model. Again, to try to evangelize to the community what are we, what the intent of the policy and what was expected of them, and to answer any questions and that kind of thing. So 2014, it became clear to me that the DoD was doing compliance reviews against industry standards, and there were a couple of examples where I had run into legal concerns relative to the government trying to use an industry standard to drive their policy. And the NDIA guide for earned value management systems was definitely one of the key things that DCMA was using. They used others, but that was one of the key things. So we really were positioning ourselves poorly. So we started an initiative to replace that guide with a government guide. And so it's the DoD Earned Value Management System Implementation Guide. And the focus of that was we purposely constructed it so the very first thing that in the guide for every guideline was, what value is this for the program manager? How is this going to help them manage their program? And then we described the intent of it, and so we focused a lot of attention on not just the mechanics of, is it data quality, is it right, well, why does it matter if it's right? And so that people would, and as part of that, we reduced the attributes and that sort of thing, and then we worked closely with DCMA.
I know. Okay. You're doing great. Got a plane going over.
Oh,
Don't move.
Should I move the microphone slightly too?
Say that again, huh?
Should I move the microphone slightly?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. It's going, doing good. I mean,
You sort of
everything's fine.
moved.
We had a little bit of the mower sounds in there, but it was never bad.
No.
You're sounding good. Keep looking at Loretta. What I'm planning to do with everything you're saying is I'm going to be cutting away and having other people talking about what you're talking about. It's going to work out real nice.
You know where you're going?
I know where I'm
Do you
going.
need your cheat
We're
sheet?
still rolling, by the way.
I mean, I know you have it, but
no,
You know where
it
you
was
are?
due to the communication. Yeah, we're going to get into 24. I was just
Okay.
about ready to start
Go ahead.
2014.
Go ahead and get yourself ready. We're good to go, Rita. Oh, no, here he comes again.
no, he's just fading.
Okay, go ahead.
So 2013 was about the communication and evangelization of what we're doing, and then in 2014 it became clear that we needed to have our own, DoD needed to have their own guide. Focused on program management, so you can cut that stuff out, so I'll get back on the, so what we did is we actually, Parca published an initial version of the implementation guide, kind of purposefully with some things in there that would cause some debate with the compliance teams, so that we could get the compliance teams to come together and work together to do, because that's really who we needed. The DCMA, the Intel community, Soup Ships actually did their own compliance review, and so all those three different groups needed to get together and work together to figure out what the common.
Pick it up where we started. I'm starting to talk about Soup Ships. Gotta wait for this machine.
Yeah, well, I think he's gonna be ongoing.
Yeah. Well, do me a favor. Look where you are standing right now, because I want you to come back to there. Go that way for me. Yep. There. Okay. You're out. You were in the sun too much there,
Oh,
and the sun's moving on us. So I'm gonna move you a little bit here.
damn thing.
That's your new spot. Okay.
All right.
We had many eclipse in Indianapolis. It was a bit noticeable.
So I was in DC for the 21st and I missed it. I was indoors and didn't really notice it.
Oh, bummer. Well, you were a little far. You were probably like where
Yeah.
we were in Indianapolis.
Hey, is it ready to come on up and get in position? And
Are you gonna go with the mower?
not as it is right now. Someone's going in reverse right now too.
Do you know where you are? Okay.
Okay. Go
Let's
ahead
do
and
it.
get
Let's
to
do it.
it. Yeah, I have to do it in percentages here. Go for it, Lord.
All right, so I had to get that group together in order, because those are the smart guys. Those are the ones that have been doing compliance reviews for 20 years. I needed to get them to create the document. So I needed to give them a common enemy, so to speak, a common document that they could go after and chew up and then recreate on their own. This was one of the. It was a very interesting year. We created that. We put it out for review to the government people. There was a bunch of gnashing of the teeth about what was in it, which was purposeful. And then we came to an adjudication process where we got all of those groups, members from those from DCMA, the Navy, as well as the Intel community, to get together to adjudicate the comments on. I got a facilitator to basically just facilitate the process, because we had a lot to do in a short period of time, and so we needed to cut things off and that sort of thing. Well, if I was in there trying to facilitate and cut it off, they might have misunderstood that was, I was driving something one way or another. So I got an independent facilitator who did an excellent job, didn't know anything about earned value, so there was no driving anything, just telling these guys they had time limits and time boxes and stuff, and they had to get through it. I kicked it off on a Monday morning, and you saw a lot of these grumpy faces, body language, facing away from you, all this kind of stuff, which was fine. And we talked about the objectives, we talked about kind of the process a little bit, and then I went TDY for the week. Came back on Friday morning, and it was the biggest transformation of collaboration that I'd ever seen in my life. They'd worked together, for 8-9 hours a day throughout the week, and that Friday morning came in to check on status. Well, they had nicknames for each other. They were, kidding around with each other, and they were the ones. Then we walked through the schedule. Where are we at with the schedule? And I was trying to be aggressive with it, and they said, no, I think we can pull it to the left even more here, and we can. And so the group really came together perfectly.
Sorry. Pick it up at group came together really well. Those were loud screams. I can't deal with that. Anytime you're ready. Go ahead.
The group really came together perfectly, and they're the ones who then established what needed to be fixed. They're the ones who established the timeline. They're the ones who established what was going to be final in the guide or not. And it came down to where there was maybe a handful of debate that lasted, but they had 2 weeks of adjudication the first time. We put it back out for review, updated it, put it back out for review to the government, and then we had another adjudication process. Then we put it out to industry for 30 days or 60 days, and then we had a collaboration with industry they had a few concerns. We had the adjudication team basically, would listen to what they said, and sometimes it influenced what ended up in the final document. Sometimes it was, it was best for the government to not. But the collaboration was really good, and it started with trying to figure out how to get the key, when you've got these key SMEs who all know exactly what they're doing, because they do, working together, it really came together nicely. So we were able to publish the implementation guide in early 2015.
Period. Now, move over to your left about a foot.
How's the trash can?
There. And go ahead and move your background sound I can deal with.
Just come forward a little bit. There.
Yeah,
Can you move the trash can?
what did you say, Rita?
Trash can?
Trash can is not in the shot. The trash can is not in the shot.
All right.
Thank you. Whoever you are, thank you.
So where were we?
You just said it was 2016, I think it was?
2015 published, and then I'm going to go back to 2014, talk Agile, and then that'll probably conclude it.
Okay, we're rolling.
So that concluded, the implementation guide was published in early 2015, and I believe that Park is actually working on an update now. It's 2 years later, makes sense. It's been in use for a bit, and so we look forward to, I look forward to see what they've adjusted, that sort of thing. So going back to 2014 for a second, one key initiative came out of there that we would not have expected. But in July of 2014, the departments came and said, you know, hey, Agile is being used on our programs, and we're having program offices come and tell us, and contractors tell us, the EV focal points, that we can't do EV and Agile together. So, you know, that's what you know, the DoD policy shop is all about. Well, let's look into that and see if there's something that we can do across the enterprise. So we initiated an Agile EVM collaboration group with NDIA. We had some government sessions. We had some government and industry sessions. We actually had a forum where a 2-day symposium where a variety of industry people doing Agile and EVM came and said very brass tacks of exactly what they're doing. Again, one of the first times I've ever seen competitive folks come together and talk nuts and bolts about how they're implementing some things. And what was really interesting is that they were all really in the same ballpark, but we surfaced a handful of, I think we called them touch points, as far as where earned value and Agile come together, that just needed to be talked about. There might be compliance concerns, there might be program health concerns, and, you know, how do you integrate the two and how do you communicate to the two different groups and that sort of thing. And so by the time I left in the end of 2015, there was some very initial guidance that was put out. There was a lot of collaboration going on. I believe that John McGregor had actually held an AT&L level symposium on Agile and EVM where Mrs. McFarland was represented, and so he's continuing the effort, and he published a desk guide, you know, about a year ago, and he continues to work on maturing that desk guide as well. So the Agile EVM is definitely another one of those collaboration success stories. So when I got out of the government in 2015, I leaned pretty heavily. The reason I got out was a variety of reasons. Well, first, my wife wanted me to move back to where the grandchildren are, which is good. It's all good. But I wanted to be in a position. I'd been up doing policy for quite some time, and we did policy that would help all of those 5 initiatives to try to help its use, to focus on integrated program management, to increase the data quality, and so, you know, the next step was really institutionalizing it within the enterprise. Well, you know, from a policy perspective, you can only influence that much, so much. So I moved out into industry to become a consultant, and then make myself available to government and/or industry for those, you know, want to talk about integrated program management, how that can be done, no matter what work scope, that kind of thing. Talk about, you know, Agile and EVM. And that's really been the primary work that I've been doing for the past 1.5 to 2 years, is either training IPM or talking Agile and EVM to government and industry sources, and I hope to continue to contribute.
Awesome. Can you want to go ahead and just give it a chance here and just talk about them a little bit?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah, just looking at
Is he in a good place?
what?
Is he in a good place?
He's okay. He's all right.
I'm okay, you're okay. We're in a good place. Okay, so NDIA is looking into, no, it's not NDIA.
That's not.
College and Performance Management is looking at putting in an initiative for,
Start one more time. I was working on your focus as you were changing your thoughts there. So why don't you say it? Anytime you're ready.
College of Performance Management has recently surfaced some interest in more integrated program management kinds of things, and one of the initiatives they're looking at, there's a building information model that the construction industry uses that really tightly couples the cost, schedule, and technical all the way through the development process into the build process. And so it's really impossible for technical, cost, and schedule to be disconnected, because every piece of data, whether it's design data or that kind of thing, it has the associated estimated cost, actual cost, and schedule on that. Few years back when I was in, probably 2012-ish, I actually sat on an airplane next to a construction guy, and that was the first I'd ever heard of BIM. And essentially when he was talking about it, I related it to the WBS, right? Because of WBS, every leg of it has a cost, a schedule, a technical. But the data early on in the development program is not necessarily tightly coupled, right? You estimate trade studies, you estimate design documents, that sort of stuff. But the actual attributes of the design documentation don't have in the database itself associated cost and schedule. It's more of a, kind of relating it. And I believe, and I've got a lot to learn about BIM, I believe BIM more tightly couples that. And so now that there's actually an initiative, I think that's kind of the next thing coming that people really need to pay attention to, because that's the next generation of how do we do integrated analysis and try to understand how to manage our programs better.
Great. And that's enough for me for having a bridge if I want to go into that. That was really nice. I think you did a great job.
Well, thank you.
Are you okay with what you did? Yeah.